It begins with stillness, not calm, not peace, but a world where the air never moves. A child stands in an open field, watching the sky. Clouds hang above like frozen shapes, barely shifting, as if painted onto the atmosphere. Leaves on trees remain perfectly still. Smoke from a distant fire rises upward in a straight, silent line, never bending, never drifting. There is no wind, not a breeze, not a gust, not even the smallest movement of air across the skin. First, it feels normal, because people do not miss what they have never known. This is simply how the world has always been. Sails do not exist. Flags do not wave. Hair does not move unless touched. The ocean is not alive with rolling waves driven by invisible forces. Instead, its surface lies heavy and slow, moving only under the pull of gravity, rising and falling with tides but never dancing with the energy of wind. Humanity grows in a world of still air, and that changes everything. In ancient times, early humans look at water differently. They build simple boats, but they do not travel far, because movement across water is slow. Without wind, there are no sails, only oars, only human strength. Crossing even short distances becomes exhausting, dangerous, time-consuming, so people stay close to land. Rivers become lifelines, because rivers move, water flows, and where water flows, people can travel. But the open sea remains distant, unknown, not because it is impossible to cross, but because it is too slow to matter. Civilizations grow inward, not outward. Empires expand across land, through roads, through animals, through human effort, not across oceans, not across vast distances of water, because the cost is too high, the reward too uncertain. Meanwhile, something else quietly changes the world: weather. Without wind, the atmosphere behaves differently. Storms do not move the same way. Clouds form slowly. Rain falls straight down without direction. There are no storms sweeping across continents. No winds carrying moisture from oceans deep into land. Some regions become permanently dry. Others remain constantly wet, because air does not circulate. Climate becomes fixed, stable, but uneven. Agriculture develops under these conditions. Farmers learn their environment intimately, but they cannot rely on seasonal winds to bring change. No monsoons, no shifting air patterns, only local conditions, and this limits growth, because without moving air, ecosystems become isolated. Meanwhile, in the ancient world, exploration slows. There are no great sailing cultures, no massive fleets crossing oceans, no trade routes carried by wind, no age of sail. Trade exists, but it is slower, more local, more limited. Caravans cross land. Goods move through difficult routes, but the world remains divided, separated by oceans that are too costly to cross regularly. There is no sudden connection between continents, no rapid exchange of ideas across vast distances. Knowledge spreads slowly. Civilizations develop in isolation. Different worlds grow without knowing each other. Meanwhile, technology evolves differently. Without sails, ships are smaller, less efficient, designed for rivers and coasts, not for deep oceans. Naval power is limited, because large-scale fleets are impractical without wind. War remains mostly on land. The sea is not a battlefield of empires. It is a barrier, a boundary that slows interaction. Then comes the Middle Ages, and here the difference becomes profound. In our world, this is the age where sailing begins to connect continents. Trade expands, exploration grows. But in this world, none of that happens. There are no great voyages across the Atlantic, no explorers driven by wind across unknown waters, no ships carried by currents and sails to distant lands. Because without wind, the ocean remains too vast, too slow, too dangerous to cross in meaningful numbers. the discovery of new continents is delayed, perhaps by centuries, perhaps longer, because reaching them requires enormous effort. Thousands of kilometers powered only by human rowing. Supply limits, fatigue, survival. Few attempt it, fewer succeed. And without regular travel, there is no rapid exchange, no global connection. The world remains divided into separate spheres of civilization. Europe develops, Asia develops, Africa develops, the Americas develop, but they do so largely alone. Meanwhile, something else is missing: wind power itself. There are no windmills, no early mechanical systems powered by moving air. Energy must come from other sources: water, animals,
humans.
This slows technological progress, because wind was one of the first natural forces humans learned to harness. Without it, innovation takes a different path, perhaps slower, perhaps more dependent on other resources. Cities grow differently. Without wind, air becomes stagnant. Smoke from fires lingers. Pollution builds. Breathing becomes harder in crowded areas. Disease spreads differently, because air does not move to disperse particles. Urban life becomes more difficult, more dangerous, because the atmosphere itself does not refresh. Meanwhile, the ocean remains quiet, heavy, almost lifeless on the surface. Without wind, waves are smaller, more controlled. The sea feels less alive, less dynamic, but also more isolating, because without moving air, the horizon feels farther away, more unreachable, and humanity feels that distance, because without wind, the world is not connected. It is separated. Each region grows with its own ideas, its own culture, its own understanding of reality. And without constant exchange, those differences become deeper, stronger, more permanent. As centuries pass, the world slowly evolves, but not as a single global civilization, as many, disconnected, independent, unaware of each other for far longer than in our reality. And as humanity stands on the edge of what would have been its age of exploration, something becomes clear. The wind was never just air moving across the planet. It was movement itself, carried ships, carried ideas, carried connection, and without it, the world does not stop, but it stays still. And in that stillness, humanity grows, but it grows apart, not together, because without wind, the world is not driven forward. It is held in place. At first, humanity does not understand what it is missing, because progress still happens. Cities grow, empires rise, technology advances, but everything moves slower, more isolated, more dependent on what already exists nearby. And over time, this difference begins shaping the entire structure of civilization. Without wind, the oceans remain barriers, not highways. Travel across them is possible, but painfully inefficient. Rowing fleets require enormous manpower, hundreds of people just to move a single vessel. Food must be carried in large quantities. Water must be stored. Fatigue becomes the greatest enemy, because humans cannot row forever. Journeys that would take weeks with sails take months, or fail entirely. As a result, long-distance sea travel is rare. Expeditions are expensive, risky, unpredictable. Most societies decide it is not worth it. And that decision changes history, because without regular ocean travel, continents remain separate for far longer. There is no rapid exchange of knowledge, no sudden arrival of foreign goods, no unexpected encounters between distant civilizations. Each part of the world evolves in its own direction. Europe develops without knowing the Americas. The Americas develop without influence from Europe. Asia grows along its own path. Africa builds its own systems. And these worlds remain largely disconnected, not because they cannot meet, but because the effort required is too great. Meanwhile, something else begins to change. In a world without wind, naval warfare never becomes dominant. There are no massive fleets crossing oceans, no global conflicts spanning continents. Wars remain local, regional, land-based, because projecting power across water is too difficult. Empires expand outward through land routes. Roads become more important than seas. Control of territory depends on geography, not navigation, and this creates a different balance of power. Some regions become dominant not because of exploration, but because of position. Those connected by land grow stronger. Those separated by water remain isolated. Meanwhile, trade evolves differently. Without ships driven by wind, global trade is limited. Goods move slowly, through caravans, through rivers, through human effort. This makes trade more expensive, more rare, more valuable. Spices, metals, fabrics, and tools do not spread quickly. Innovation travels slowly. A new idea in one region may take generations to reach another, if it reaches at all, because there is no fast way to carry it across oceans. The world becomes a collection of knowledge pockets, each one developing independently, and this slows technological progress, not because humans are less intelligent, but because they are less connected. Ideas grow best when they meet other ideas. Without that exchange, growth becomes limited. Meanwhile, energy remains a major constraint. Without wind, there are no windmills, no early machines powered by air. Water becomes the primary natural force. Rivers drive mills. Animals provide strength. Humans do the rest. But these sources are limited. They require location, effort, maintenance. Energy is harder to access, and that slows development, because every system depends on power. Cities grow, but more carefully, more slowly, because supporting large populations without efficient energy is difficult. At the same time, the environment behaves differently. Without wind, pollution does not disperse. Smoke from fires lingers. Air becomes heavy, especially in growing cities. Breathing becomes harder. Disease spreads more easily because air remains stagnant. Illness does not move quickly across regions, but within cities it becomes concentrated. This creates a different kind of health crisis. Not global pandemics spreading rapidly across continents, but local outbreaks that linger longer. Harder to escape, harder to clean, because nothing carries them away. Meanwhile, oceans remain quiet. But beneath that quiet, they are unchanged. Currents still move, tides still rise and fall, but the surface lacks life. No waves driven by wind, no storms crossing vast distances. The sea becomes predictable, but also lifeless in appearance. And this affects how humans see it, not as a force of adventure, but as a boundary, a place of separation, not exploration. Because exploration requires movement, and movement requires energy. Without wind, that energy must come from humans. And humans have limits, so they stay closer to home. And over centuries, this creates a different kind of humanity. Less global, more local, more connected to immediate surroundings, less aware of distant worlds. Cultures become deeper, but narrower, because they grow inward instead of outward. Philosophy, art, science all develop, but within isolated systems. Different civilizations may reach similar ideas, but independently, without knowing each other. Meanwhile, something profound becomes clear. The wind was not just a natural force. It was a connector. It linked continents, moved ships, carried ideas. Without it, the world does not stop evolving, but it evolves separately, fragmented, slower, more divided, and as centuries pass, humanity eventually finds ways to cross oceans more effectively. Stronger ships, better storage, more organized crews, perhaps even early mechanical propulsion. But these come much later, delayed by generations, because the initial push, the age of sails, never happened. And without that push, the timeline of human history shifts. Discoveries come later. Connections form later. Globalization begins later. Everything that depended on movement waits. And in that delay, the world becomes something different. Not worse, not better, just separate. Because without wind, humanity never experiences the moment when the world suddenly becomes one. Instead, it remains many worlds, living side by side, but not together. And as people finally begin reaching across oceans after centuries of isolation, they do not find a familiar world. They find something stranger, a planet where civilizations have grown apart for so long that meeting each other feels less like discovery and more like first contact. Because without wind, the distance between people was never just physical. It was time.